Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Asian Americans. I am your host, Jerry Wan. Wherever you are and whenever you may be listening to this, we wish you all the health and happiness and safety as we go through these challenging times together. We're recording this right at the end of June. And had we done things right the first time around, right now is about the time that we should have been going back to life as normal. And as it stands today, on June 26th, a couple states are reclosing some of the things that they opened prematurely. So as we head into the summer and as we think about what life may look like going forward, all we can do is take precautionary measures, keep our distance, stay home, wear a mask. And we really, really hope that you are staying safe and that your family and your loved ones continue to stay safe. And I think this is such an interesting and amazing conversation to have with our guest today. A lot of these policies, a lot of these rules about reopening and healthcare concerns are made by people that we put into office. And sometimes we go, how the hell did that person win an election to have that much power to make decisions about businesses opening or public health and safety concerns? And yet we don't care enough as much as we should, particularly in the Asian American community, about politics. Yes, we get it. Some of our parents came here and they were always going to see themselves as not American. My parents see themselves as Koreans living in America, and many of our parents do too. But for those of us who are either born here or spent a significant chunk of our lives here, who are educated here, we have no excuse but to at least participate in the civic process and to vote. And if you're bold, and as daring, and as confident as our guest here is today, you might actually even decide to run for Congress. So without further ado, it brings me so much honor and excitement to welcome David Kim to the show. Hi, David.
Hello, Jerry. Thank you so much for having me on here. I'm excited.
I I have been waiting to talk to you ever since you came on my radar, and it was a Facebook post that a friend had shared, and I don't remember who that friend is, and we have a lot of friends within the community, and I was like, holy crap, there's another Korean American guy running for Congress here in LA, and I don't think we as a community will ever get, or this never gets old for the community, that when somebody that looks like you and looks like me runs for something in the public sphere, even before we find out anything about who they are or what they stand for, you get a little excited because, particularly in a very public facing political game or political world, these are things that we were not necessarily encouraged or even let to believe that we were allowed to do or thought that we could do. So then I started learning about your platform, and I was on the Yang Gang train for a while, and I was like, oh my God, like this is a guy that I really want to get to know, and I think is going to be right for our community because the district that you are running in, the 34th district in the state of California, is home to Koreatown, which, while called Koreatown, is perhaps one of the most diverse places in California. And the district also represents downtown and Echo Park and some northern places. And so, really, really excited to learn about you today and to hear about your journey in America. You're a lawyer. You've worked in the entertainment industry, so you are not a political or politician by birth, and maybe that's a job title that you may not be want to be called, but at least somebody who makes change and cares about the people. So tell us about the Kim family's journey to America. How did you guys end up here? To where did you guys move? And share with us a little bit about the early years of David's life.
Yes. I just to start with our district, I decided to run for office in mid-fall last year, a little late, due to the fact of deep realizations I had in terms of our people in masses are suffering financially. They have 2 to 3 jobs to make ends meet month to month. We have 40 plus thousand unhoused brothers and sisters living in just the city of Los Angeles alone. We have politicians and elected officials having the FBI investigate and raid their homes because of corrupt developer relationships and corporate relationships in that. And so, although I was working at the time, I had just gotten my dream job, working as a high level legal executive of an entertainment company that's pretty well known worldwide, and etc. I was really sad. I was sad because the people I knew, the family members I knew, the friends I knew, the neighbors I knew, they were still working, hustling 2 to 3 jobs to make ends meet. I myself, I mean, I still have over $200,000 in law school loans that still have yet to be paid off because during the years I lived in Los Angeles, I also had to hustle. And so there weren't opportunities for me to go ahead and pay off that debt. But then for me, it was a matter of decision making where it kind of came down to, well, if you just hold out 5 years, 10 years in this job, you'll be debt free. You'll pay off your law school loans. You don't have to worry. But then for me, I was deeply sad because masses of our people are still financially struggling, myself included. I mean, forget about me, but what about them? So it was this urgency that led me to throwing my hat into the race and running for office. So, and what's particularly interesting about our district, Jerry, is our district, it does cover Koreatown, like what you said. Koreatown, it's played a very influential role in the Los Angeles area and the shaping of its culture and the people and the restaurants as well as a secondary thing. And in that regard, and there's also other Asian communities. So we have Little Bangladesh, we have Filipino Town, we have Chinatown, we have Little Tokyo. So all of these other Asian communities are also in the district, but we yet haven't, and not to say that we're talking about racial politics or anything, but for these other communities, they've been neglected in a lot of different ways. And so although I think true equality is one where we're not looking at anybody's race or whatnot because we're all one race and it's humanity, but these other communities have been marginalized in a lot of ways. And
Right.
so I do have that deep rooted connection to that. And so for I know the Korean community, it's a big thing in the sense of having somebody that looks like them run for office as well and also make that attempt, because like you and I know, politics isn't a traditional area to go into at all.
Right.
It most definitely is not. And so for when I had made this decision, my Asian parents were like, "Oh, you should just stay in your job 5, 10 more years. You're making all this money and you should pay off your law school loans. That's stupid. Why are you running for office?" But then eventually when I made my decision, they eventually embraced it. And there's a whole story behind that too. But my parents initially, they, just like those who are listening, your parents, immigrated to the States to pursue the American dream, to have their children live better lives than they did. And so my parents, they immigrated in 1983. After my brother was born. I have one older brother. He's older by 11 months. We're Siamese twins in a way.
Ooh, me too. Isn't that
Oh, really?
crazy? Yeah,
Are you
11
the
months
older
and
or
6 days.
younger?
I'm the younger.
Oh, I'm the younger too.
11 months and 6 days.
Oh, wow. I think ours is 11 months and 9 days.
So when I was old enough to figure out what that meant, holy crap. Like,
Yeah,
guys, what the hell, right?
yeah,
Oh man, I thought I was the only one. That is, yeah.
yeah.
But he's June and I'm May, so most people don't ever like put the two and two together.
That's interesting. He's my brother's May and then I'm April.
Okay.
So, but we're actually both Tauruses. Are you guys? I don't know if you're into
No,
stars or anything.
I'm a Taurus. I don't know what J is.
Okay, got it. So he's
Whatever the middle
probably
of
the
June
one
is.
after.
Yeah.
Got it. Yeah, so my parents, they that's very I actually what's even I don't know if he's actually a mutual friend of ours. I don't know if you know a friend named Albert Kim. He's an attorney in New York. He went to Diamond Bar High School.
I'm not I know many Albert Kims. Not sure if I remember this particular one.
Okay. So he and I actually went to law school together, and it so turned out that we actually went to college as well.
Huh.
And he's a year above my year in college, but he and I have the same birthday. And then our brothers. So he's 1 year older than me, but I have the same birthday as him.
Uh-huh.
His brother is the same year as me, but his birthday is my brother's birthday.
So it's the same gap.
Yeah, so it's the same gap, but same
That's
birthdays as
crazy.
well. So that was kind of crazy, but yeah. In any case, 11 months, we fought a lot, my brother and I. So I was born and raised in the States right after my parents immigrated.
Mm.
So my dad was a pastor in Korea, pastor of like a huge church. He was focused on the college kids. So he was at
Mm.
this church called Sungi Methodist Church in Incheon, and he was connected to my mom through sort of like a blind date arrangement, where one of his church members had said, Pastor Kim, I know this beautiful lady. She's a pianist at our church in the other adult service, and she's single. You guys should connect. And like that church member connected my mom and dad, and then we have my brother and me. So they immigrated to the States. My dad, he first immigrated he took us all to Arizona. I was still in my mom's womb, and then I was
Mm.
born and raised for the first 5 years of my life in Arizona, in this small town called Sierra Vista, 40 minutes outside of Tucson. And there, my dad was a pastor to a church where the wives were Korean, and then the husbands were in the military base in Sierra
Really?
Vista. And so it was a Korean speaking conversation. And so my dad started learning his English through their husbands. And so it was a very familiar church environment that we continued to grow up with throughout our lives. So then at age 5, my dad was called to serve at a bigger church in Tacoma, Washington. So we moved to Tacoma, Washington. Age 5, we started going to a new school. We got very familiar, plugged in. We stayed there up until I think age 16, sophomore year. Then we moved to Northern California because my dad wanted to plant a church in Northern California. And after going then to, I think, what was my third high school, by that time I'm like sort of freaked out, because for me, after being plugged into such a community, like with your childhood friends all through elementary, middle school, and then high school, um, and then to go to a different new high school, then to go to a different new high school. I think by the time I went to my third high school in San Jose, I was probably traumatized, but I didn't realize it at the time. Now looking back, I think I was definitely. Now I remember those moments where I was traumatized to the point where, because I think, and this is where our tendencies as human beings is, when we feel that we're in danger, our amygdala turns on and we're in this fight, flight, or freeze mode. So back in the days, it would come on when we were cavemen and like we were afraid of being attacked or eaten. But nowadays, our amygdala acts up when we feel like, when we fear social judgment or
Hmm.
being that new kid. And so I think that triggered me a lot. And so I even remember days where um, I would eat lunch by myself and not tell anybody that I was eating lunch by myself. But then, and then during class or during break times, like I'm supposed to be the loud and funny guy. And that's what I would do. And so nobody would ever have thought that David would eat lunch by himself, but I did, because I was so scared of people judging me and all of that. So it's definitely something kind of as a progression that I've seen throughout kind of high school, college, adult life, growing, in the sense of, I'm not sure if it's rooted in the sense of growing up as a pastor's kid. The number one thing that we were told to do is, if a kid hits you, you just need to let them hit you more. Don't fight back, because the moment
Mm.
you fight back, then 50 families are going to leave our church. So you should not do that. And so there was a time even where this my brother and this other kid at church, they were horse playing, and um, my brother accidentally hit him where, like, in the face, but it was completely child's play. Like, they're kids, they're playing around. That incident took out like 80 families out of the church, because they said that the pastor's kid was evil and rude and needed to learn how to respect people and not hit people. And so so I think a lot of that was just shoved down our necks and like, be
Ooh.
quiet, like you have no voice, do like. And so I think it was just
Yeah.
this, like, whenever like we went to church, people would complain to our parents and say, hey, your second son wasn't bowing 90 degrees to me, he only shook his head. And so then our dad would whip us for that, for not bowing 90 degrees. And like, there was actually one moment, Jerry, and since I agreed to share all and tell all, there was this one moment I distinctly remember. And I know that, like, for some people, they ask each other, like, what's your earliest memory that you have? One of my earliest memory is this girl, this church member's girl. She was jumping around on tables, and suddenly the table that she was jumping on fell beneath her, And so she like sprained her ankle and she couldn't walk anymore and she was crying. And then suddenly the whole adult service, like we're all kids. I think we're like 4 years old, 5 years old, 6 years old. And I don't know whoever was watching over us. I don't know where he or she was um, at the time because it was just such a traumatic experience. But the whole adult service stopped. Like 100+ adult members started coming down. Suddenly they're like, "What happened? What happened?" And then she pointed her fingers at me, and I didn't do anything, and I'm just standing there. And my dad, without even listening to me, and I'm screaming, "I didn't do anything! I didn't do anything!" He takes me to his office. He puts like paper over his glass portion of his
Oh,
door, and then he starts beating me without even listening to what I had to say. Because for Korean pastors, especially, whatever their church members say is the Bible, is the word, because
right,
they need to do everything that they can to prevent that church member from leaving. Because, and I'm going to be real, Jerry, because church members pay tithe and offering. So when church members leave, that's offering going out as well. And so for pastors, it's also a startup and a business. So for his kid to mess that shit up, no, that's not happening on my dad's end. And on my end, I'm like, dude, you're not even listening to me. You don't even
right.
know what happened. And so my earliest memory is just seeing a pool of blood. I'm like 4 or 5 years old, and I'm just getting hit for something I didn't even do.
Ay, ay,
And so
ay.
that, I think that's sort of what I had grow in me as sort of um, this bitterness that grew towards my dad. And I know that for us Asian, or some of us Asian American males, our relationships with our dads are hard anyway. But
Right.
then coupled with this whole pastor thing where he believes everything a church member says over his wife and over his sons, it became very difficult. And that's what we had to deal with growing up. Um, but yeah, it was definitely a very unique upbringing and growth in that, and stepping into that, and as of recently, I think that's why perhaps I might have during some seasons of my life completely go like way, I'm not Korean, I'm not Asian, I'm white. There were those moments that I did have, to be honest, throughout my upbringing. So it's not a surprise, but just to kind of see the different developments is also just good to learn, and to really realize and take lessons from.
But when you were growing up from 0 to 5, I had to look up where Sierra Vista was on a map because I wasn't familiar
Hmm.
with the town. It's like a bordering town. Closest Mexican city is Nogales, and even though the base is there, I imagine that there's probably not as many or not very many at all Korean or even Asian Americans. From what you shared with me, the congregation was mostly mixed families. So from very early on, like, did you get to see very many older kids that look like me and you? And were there out? I guess when you're the pastor's kid, the the way that they treat you is always veiled, or is filtered in some way, shape, or form. But um, even at that early age, like, were there kids that you could look up to, and what sort of influences did you gain through that?
Yeah, I think, well, in regards to that, when growing up from age 0 to 5, because it's such an early age, you're not able to distinguish whether or not this person looks like me or doesn't look like me at that
True.
early of an age, or at least for me, I couldn't. It wasn't until later on during the later elementary years that that became more real to me, when people, because by age 5 we had moved to Washington State, and that's when I
Mm,
realized, oh, I look different, because these kids that I have no idea who they are. They're in the car next to me waiting at a red stoplight doing this to me. And I'm like,
yeah.
why the fuck are they doing that to me? Or like every stoplight that we were at, Jerry, it was a common thing for me and my brother. It was so common. It was like an everyday type of thing. My brother would be like, hey, look to your side. And I'm like, no, I don't want to look. Because there would
Ay,
just
ay,
be
ay.
kids doing this. And then their parents would be sitting in the front looking at what they're doing. And they're like, they're not even telling their kids to stop it. They're just looking and saying, "Oh, that's cute." But it's like it was that kind of reality that we had that forced us to wake up and realize, "Oh, we look different." Okay, got it. But in regards to, I think because it was such an early age, I didn't really notice it that much over there. Because also in Washington State, I think with that being Arizona, there were definitely no other kids that look like us
Mm.
that we grew up with. It wasn't
Yeah.
until we moved to Tacoma, Washington, that we started to see a little more, and where we uh, became aware of that Koreanness and realized we were different. So now thinking of it, I remember in second and third grade, somebody mentioning how my lunch smelled. And
Mm.
I came home and started yelling at my mom, and I was like, "Why did you give me that food?" And then I was such a horrible kid. And then she started packing like American sandwiches and trying to help me fit into the mold. And I remember those moments, and I know that like there was a moment even during sixth grade, because my parents spent a lot of their time within the Korean American church community. They didn't have the time and freedom to go take English classes, because they were doing like 20, 30 Bible studies a day from like 8 a.m. to 11 p.m. and then come home. And so they didn't really have a time to learn English. And so I remember even during the PTA meetings and whatnot, I would tell my mom and dad not to come because I was embarrassed that they couldn't speak English. And during sixth, and I cry to this day every time I write my Mother's Day card. But in sixth grade, there was I had forgotten my lunch or something, and my mom had come to our middle school to find me. And my friends were telling me, "Hey, David, I think your mom's looking for you. Your mom's looking for me." The first thing I think of isn't like, "Oh, I'm thankful that my mom brought that for me." It was like, how dare she go to my friends and tell them that she's my mom and all of this. And because for me, I think where I learned that from, because monkey see, monkey do, and I hate to share the secrets with my parents, but my parents too, like they're genuine people. Like my mom, I've learned so much from her. She's like a Mother Teresa to me. But they also, as being the Asian people that they are and leading a church, they had to save face a lot.
Mm.
So all of the saving face and looking prim and proper, like everything was cool on the outside, I learned from monkey see, monkey do from my parents. And so I wanted to maintain that, to like maintain this image and appearance that I had. So for my mom to come to my middle school and just show that she does not know a single word of English, I was embarrassed by that. So I went to my locker where she was waiting, and I yelled at her and I said, "Mom, why are you here? You can't even speak English. This is so embarrassing for me." And then I started crying, and then I left her there. And then I came home, and then my mom was in her room, and she said she was sick. She wasn't sick. She was very heartbroken that I had done that to her. And so she was just in her room all night telling me, my brother and my dad, that she was just sick. But just kind of thinking about that, and realizing, oh man, if I could rewind time, I would rewind time to those moments so that I could say, "Mom, I love you, but I don't know how to deal with my feelings and my emotions and all of these protection mechanisms that I have in my head to deal with this right now." And that's what I tell her. Um, and of course she understands, and we've had our ups and downs even as an adult, because I recently came out to them in 2017 or 18. So yeah, we've had our ups and downs, and it's been a great ride though. And I've come to really embrace my Asian American heritage even more through my parents, because they do have good values that they passed on to us.
I think it isn't typically until many of us are in our 30s, whether that's the average time that like people start getting married, or like you've been an adult for a certain amount of time where you know what it feels like to be an adult, and um, you start to really understand the perspective of the parents, because you're definitely not alone. No way in the embarrassment of parents, right? Like trying to minimize information, trying to minimize interactions, trying to almost, do the bare minimum. Um, some guests share stories of like, drop me off a couple blocks away. I don't want you, my friends to see you, or, um, and then whether it was through church, as it in your case, or for better opportunities, or as refugees for so many of our other friends, like the idea that in our age now, if you and I had to pick up our shit and go to a different country and start from zero, we don't do any better than they did. And if that doesn't humble you, like, think harder, right? Because, and it's not like we you and I, having lived in New York City and in California, where it's diverse and we're educated and we have networks, our parents grew up in post-war Korea in a very homogeneous dictator, president environment, and then to be like, all right, go, right? And at least in my case, we moved to Fullerton, which is like Korea light, but you went to like almost Mexico, right? Like, and so we have to give our parents so much credit for
Yeah.
doing what they did, and our frustration that they weren't being American enough for them was, don't force me to be somebody who I'm not, because the idea that they could move away from Korea to start life anew in America was not something that they were raised to believe it would be a possibility, right? So, I think it's something I struggle with still, just the proper communication and the frustrations. I mean, as a parent, where you're just like, you don't want to be offensive to your mom because she raised you and you turned out okay, but sometimes you have differences of opinion on how you should raise your kids, right? But it's their grandkids, so they spoil the shit out of them, as all grandparents do, or whatever it is, right? Like, I don't know, even in my 30s, like whenever I change jobs, it's like, oh shit, what's Amma gonna think? And it's like, dude, you have your own kids. Like, why is that the first thing? But that's still a part of how I think it's still wired in me, that like I will never stop loving my mom in the deepest way. But I also wish, as you just shared with us, like, but they were different in some ways.
Yeah.
And it's not, I don't think you would have had it your way, where like, obviously when you're a kid, you don't have the emotional maturity to be like, oh, I love you, thank you for bringing my lunch. But at the same time, like, and especially it gets trickier too when, as it is in your parents' case, their profession is in church. So prioritization of things, or um, believing that doing Bible study or tending to church members' needs is more important than prioritizing your own emotional development or emotional needs or even happiness. That's perhaps not agreeable to a lot of people, but you should be able to have enough empathy to understand where they came from, um, especially as it in your case, because that was actually their livelihood, right? Like, as you mentioned, church is a business too, and revenue needs to come in for the thing to work, right? And so that's, I mean, I see your pattern of, it's hard, and Seattle probably wasn't the way it is back then as it is today. Probably not as many Koreans and then whatnot. Talk to me about college, because you go to Cal. Cal, the liberal bastion of free thinking. Everybody knows what Cal's known for, right? Like, was that I guess what parts of that college experience was eye opening for you in helping you discover who you were, away from home for the first time, in a place that was accepting of a lot of different ideas and things. And was it in college that you wanted to pursue law school? Because you went to law school shortly after undergrad. Share with us a little bit about your college years, David.
Yeah, for sure. Before I do that, I feel, and I'll share this part of my life and upbringing, with due respect for my father. I think what prevented me also from realizing that, from being able to understand from their perspective, was because of all the domestic violence that my brother and I did go through, like with going to the emergency room and whatnot. And you would
Oh
think,
man.
what? Wait, David, what are you talking about? Your dad was a pastor, but it's like, I'm not going to say anything else, but it happens. And so it was a very common thing for us. And so I think that also built up,
Yeah.
just every year after year. And so, that's where, now going to college, it was like, yeah, I'm free, like Berkeley. And so my parents, they had their church in Santa Clara. They still live in Santa Clara. And they actually required us to come home every weekend because they needed my brother to teach the middle school students. I needed to teach the elementary school students. And then I also had to play piano for church. And so we would come home, we would drive from Berkeley, and my brother and I are like super tired. And my freshman year, I would try to party as hardcore as possible on Thursday night, trying to find where the Thursday parties are. And then I'm like drunk and like just passed out in the car. My brother's driving, and my brother, he's like, he was a good kid. Like, he didn't drink or anything, but he played games a lot. So because of his playing games, he started like getting, I don't know what the term is called in college or Berkeley, but he started getting notices of, hey, you should raise your grade or you're going to be on probation, like that type. But so he was kind of tired from playing games. And so there was a moment where we would drive home every week, and we almost got into a car accident because we're like tired, and like, but then we still had to do it for our parents. We had to be the good sons and like, and provide that. And so I remember every summer we joined this group called Korea Campus Crusade for Christ, to get more connected with our roots plus our religion, and to be more involved there. And every summer they would go on missions trips, and I would tell my dad, Dad, God is calling me to the missions field. Send me to missions trips right now. And he's like, well, you're not hearing God right. He wants you to stay here and play piano for us. And I'm like, no. And then I was like, oh, I think God wants me to be a missionary or pastor. He's like, you're not hearing God right still. He never said that. And like, and so there, during all of those moments, I was actually living just like, this is also, college is also the moment where I took kind of my own times of exploring myself and who I was. And so I did a bunch of first time things in regards to exploring. For me, I knew that I was gay my whole life. It's just that I didn't share that with anybody. I did share moments of that growing up where, and I'm going to be very, I'm very just honest, but I remember sharing, like, we would do Taekwondo, and then like, I think it was like in middle school or high school, my brother and and then I would come out of the Taekwondo, and as our parents were driving us home, I would whisper to my brother and say, hey, Young, that guy was cool, right? And my brother was like, what do you mean? And he's like, I, I think he's cool. I like him. And then my brother's like, shh, don't say that. I was like, oh, okay, all right. I won't say anything. So like those were the limited extent of conversations that my brother had and my brother and I had about my sexuality. And so it wasn't something that I really explored or kind of looked further in. But there was a moment, and I know you had asked for college, but there was a moment in middle school I was watching gay porn, and my parents were upstairs, and my brother was watching TV in the other family room, and suddenly I heard somebody like behind me. It was like the AOL days, like where the internet, like it takes a long time to close out windows. And so I hear like somebody breathing behind me, and I'm like, Hyung, don't tell mom. And I'm like Xing out the windows, and she's like, I'm not Hyung. And she says it in her Korean accent. And I look, I'm like, holy fuck. And like, I'm Xing out all the windows. And she calls my brother, and she makes him open up every single window because he knows how to do that. Just go to the browser history, and then she told me to go to bed. She didn't talk to me for 2-3 months. The next day, she took me to the church. She opened the door. Since she's the pastor's wife, she made me pray at the front altar for like 8 hours on my knees. She wouldn't let me get up. Every time I tried to get up, she would hit me. So she really wanted to pray the gay evil demon spirit out of me. And then she told me that she would never tell my dad or my brother. And I mean, even though my brother had seen all of that, that she would never talk about it again with him either. But a week later, their door was open, our door was open, and I heard her whispering and telling about the incident, sharing that with my dad. And I was like, oh my gosh, you just betrayed me. Like, out of all people to betray, you just betrayed me, and you're my mom. And and I didn't know how to process it back then. And so what I did was, I think, for me to be rebellious was to do drugs, to go drink, to go try other things. And so during college, I tried hooking up with other guys for the first time. And then I told my brother about it. And this was also during a time where I was involved in a Christian group. And my brother was like, you should like really pray about it. And I think you're just confused. Holy Spirit will take you and lead you to the truth. And I was like, yeah, you're right. And so then I would actually just physically abstain. If I had a thought, I would just confess to God and probably pray like 10 times every time a homosexual thought came up, or an attraction. And so that happened throughout college, end of college. Then I ended up moving to New York for law school. During the time of college, I guess the theme was I wanted to move farther and farther away from my parents, and which is kind of a sad thing because I wanted my own freedom because I felt that I was being restricted at home a lot. And one of the choices that that led me to picking law school in New York was because it was on the other side of the country.
Right.
And in addition to also being like a city that I wanted to live in because I had seen Home Alone 2, I had seen Miracle on 34th Street and all of that. So I wanted that experience. So I ended up moving to New York, and that's where I really kind of began to step into the power of who I was and began to accept and acknowledge, oh, I am gay. Like, it's okay to be gay. And so it's actually in New York that I stopped doing my guilty confession prayers of 15 minutes for every one thought that I had. I stopped doing that. And it was just more a trust. It became more a longer trust in God that he would fix me over time. And so when I left New York and graduated and moved to Los Angeles, getting my first job out here, I was still under the mentality of something's wrong with me, but it's okay. It'll take time. So just be patient. But it wasn't until here, when I was having my different life experiences, doing all of that, I realized for me now, yes, I was born and raised into a Christian family, but I think I came to accept the fact that whatever religion that works for you, use that if that helps you. If you were born into Buddhism or whichever, I don't think it's a religion. I think it's more practice Buddhism. But if you're born into Hinduism or other religions, then do that if that helps you connect with the Jewish version of who you are and higher deities, if that's your thing. But for me, given that I was born into a Christian family, I acknowledge all of that and I respect all of that. But to deny myself and say that something's wrong with me and to say that it's a defect and to allow that is something that I'm not doing justice to myself. And so for me, I realized once I started stepping up and taking care of myself and accepting myself for who I am, that's where I was able to start gaining my power back. That's where I was able to be more confident and engaging in conversations. That's where I was able to be more powerful in the deals and contracts that I did and to be able to acquire that. So it kind of came to a point where several years ago, I think 5, 6, 7 years ago, I started sharing with my friends, hey guys, I'm gay. And then after that, it wasn't until I met my boyfriend that I thought, you know what, this is getting really serious. We like each other. I should probably tell my parents. And so I told my parents February of 2018. February 2018, I told them, and they didn't take it very well at all. Long story short, I was trapped in my own car by my dad and mom, my dad on the right side of me in the passenger seat. And my dad, he's been through so much. He went through a stroke a few years ago as well. So he's partially paralyzed. Now he's gaining some mobility back, but he's still a big, strong man. And my mom was sitting in the back. And I remember I was sharing and coming out to them. And my parents just didn't know how to handle it. And coming from their perspective, yes, they immigrated to the States in 1982, 83. They came from a conservative Korea and community in which they were in, but right before. So they're exactly with the same mentality that they immigrated to the States with. So to immigrate to the States, to come to America, and then to find that your son's gay is a huge shocker for them. And it made them sort of feel like that they failed, that they shouldn't have come to America. So then I heard the first thing that my dad said was, I shouldn't have come to America. I shouldn't have come to America. I shouldn't have come to America. And then my mom, she started doing some exorcist prayers on me and throwing water on me and saying these Jesus, blood of Jesus cash words. And they were trying to do an exorcism on me for 6 hours. I eventually texted my brother, had him I texted my brother and he realized that the situation was deep. So he texted me and said, "Hey, when I get them out of your car, I want you to drive off. Don't even say hi or bye to me or them. I just want you to drive off." And so my brother came, he knocked on my window and he said, "Are you ready?" And I said, "Yes." So he went over to my car passenger side. He knocked on the door. My dad opened it. My brother picked up my dad, carried him like 30 yards, put him on the parking lot outside the Noin building. So my grandma lives in downtown, one of those senior resident buildings. So is the parking lot behind there. He picks up my dad, puts him on the parking lot. Because my dad's partially paralyzed, you have to help him to get up. So my brother deliberately laid him down. And then he picks up my mom, and my mom's trying to lock the door, but he opens my mom's door. He picks her up. My brother's huge, and like he's a great brother. I love him with all my heart. He picks up my mom. He puts her over on the parking lot, and now he's like, "Now go fucking drive." And I was like, "Okay." And then I just drove, and I didn't see my parents for 18 months because the next day my mom would leave me 10 voicemail messages, text messages. My dad would leave me 10 voicemail messages, text messages, kind of just saying, without going into the nitty gritty details. One example was my dad, a common thing he would say was, "God told me you're dying tomorrow and you'll have AIDS dripping from your butt because you'll be sleeping with somebody else in bed when you die. So don't go out tonight." And I'm like, what the? Now he's assuming that I go out every night and go sleep with people. So it was just very hurtful I mean, with the Korean Sun mentality, it was like, no, I need to listen to all of their voicemail. No, I need to read all of their text, and I'll just filter out the bad. But you can't do that, I realized, because when you've already heard the hurtful words, how do you filter that out? When you've already read the hurtful text, like how do you filter that out? So then I just had to block that out because the number of text messages and voicemails weren't diminishing after 10 days, 20 days. So then that's where I thought, you know what, mom, dad, like I'm going to give you your space. I think you just need space. And so I would check in in the beginning, I would check in the first 6 months. My parents were still the same way that they were. So then I checked in 3 months later again, they were still the same way. And then they eventually knew that, oh, our son might not be talking with us if we don't agree to his 2 requests. And my 2 requests to them were, "Mom, Dad, I love you with all my heart. Like there's no one else that I love more to that regard. And it would be very meaningful for me if you agree just to 2 things. Number 1, just don't talk about my sexuality. Number 2, like you and I, how we see God might be different in some ways. But yeah, let's not talk about religion and sexuality right now. Know that I love Jesus, know that I love God." And my parents couldn't accept that. So then the 3 months, I would check in another 3 months, I would check in another 3 months. And that's how it became 18 months.
Wow.
Because when I checked in at the 18th month, my mom and dad, surprisingly, they responded back and said, "Yes, we will agree to your 2 requests." And when I saw that, I was just so overjoyed, um, because I was overjoyed because for those 18 months, I was so scared that they would show up at my doorstep suddenly, and do everything because I've been through domestic violence. There's still those fears that you have that they would do everything their way, that they would bring a team of 10 movers, pack all my stuff, and send me to conversion therapy camp or whatever. And that, as a 33, 4-year-old to have as a fear, that's a fucked up fear to have. But for me, given how I grew up and everything that I went through, it was a legitimate fear for me. And so there were tears of joy of the fact that that fear was now ending. I didn't have to wake up every morning fearing that my parents would suddenly show up at my doorstep. And it was also just tears of joy of being connected with them again, and being able to have a relationship. And there were times still where my dad couldn't help himself and he had to talk about my sexuality and say hurtful stuff. But I know that he's still adjusting to that, and still doing that. So we've kind of come to a point where, and I also reached out as well and felt it was the appropriate time because it was around the same time that I had announced my run for Congress publicly. And I didn't want, I think for me, the fact that they immigrated to the States for me and my brother to work for a bigger life and to go through all of the differences and hardships that they had, for them to then hear from somebody else that their son's running from Congress, how hurtful would that be for them? And I didn't I didn't want them to feel that their son was rebelling against them, because one of the things my mom had said to me was, "Why are you rebelling against us for being gay? What did we do to you?" And I was like, "Mom, I'm not rebelling against you. You did everything that you could." And then she was like, "I don't believe you still have grudges against us because you're still gay." But I think I didn't expect to cry, but it was just this. If that's what they think, I can't change. You can't change what people think. You can only live and work with that. So for me, I didn't want them to hear from somebody else that I was running for Congress, because then I would also be taking that away from them intentionally in their eyes. And so I thought, you know what? I'm going to tell my parents from my mouth myself that I'm running for Congress. And so then I think that's what helped them open up a little more. And I know that to this day, they'll be freaking out at the fact that I even shared this, because for them right now, it's keep this a secret to Koreatown, LA. Don't let them know, because the moment you let them know, every single Korean person in Koreatown will not vote for you. And so it's with that mentality and that sort of kind of brainwash. I don't want to call it brainwashing, but it's with that framework and environment that I've grown up with, where it's very toxic in ways, but very liberating. So that's another thing where it's like, hey guys, like, I know, and this is another thing. I know that some of the times members of the Koreatown community are like, "Whoa, David, like, I know that you've been very active in neighborhood council and other communities in the area, but in terms of Koreatown, I haven't seen you at a KYCC thing or like at these church things." And for me, it was always this fear of not being accepted, because I'm not straight, and I'm not. I mean, I do fit all of the other check boxes. I did get that 6-digit coveted corporate job and got all straight A's and all of that. Like, I did all of that, but that one thing. And so I think that one thing kept me from being who I was. But then I think once that all happened, the reconciliation with my parents, that's where I was able to just freely start the campaign because our campaign is about financial freedom, love, and justice for all, not leaving one person out because of their color, because of their sexuality or whatnot. How everybody should have a floor to stand on economically, on how people should have equal access. And so I think my reconciliation with my parents allowed me to step up into my power more, and now really run this congressional campaign from a place of power and not from a place of victimization. So
thank you for sharing that, man. You're a brave person, man. I am sorry you had to go through that. I don't know. I will never know personally what that feels like. But to share with me that you've known your entire life and they got a heads up in junior high, like it wasn't news.
Yeah.
They got a preview, which just, it's disappointing, or I guess sad to think that in all those years, they were either in denial or just under some illusion that it would go away, that in fact, perhaps it was a choice. But I don't know. I don't know what needs to change within our community, because so many, and it's not a generational thing. Unfortunately, I think it's a religious thing. The generational thing doesn't help. You mentioned something that I believe for many years, that my parents' version of Korea and Korea politics is January 1992, and it will never change. And so Korea's gotten a lot more liberal. Korea's gotten a lot more open-minded. And even especially for my parents, like my grandfather served under senior President Park. So I don't know too many more details than that, but that just goes to share with you a little bit about like how my grandparents and my family view politics, right? A little bit on the conservative side. And that's the stamp. And so to them, Korea isn't Korea 2020. Korea is whatever the hell I made out to be in my for, my remembrance of it 28 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and add that to the layer of church, and add that even to that layer of being the pastor,
Yeah.
and you being the representation of him, publicly, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
um, I thank you for sharing that story. I again, I you have to be you, and I think I'm sorry that it took 30 some odd years for you to
Yeah.
really live life as
Yeah.
you, right? Um and for the people that are listening on I guess on either side, or um we're going through so much as a society right now. The health pandemic, um the sudden awakening for some, and yet sort of the vindication that people are finally starting to listen for others, that the world's not made to be a fair place for all people, especially not America, because people don't get to choose skin color, and people certainly don't get to choose gender. And if you believe in either, um, I am sure you've seen that video of that. There's a white woman professor standing on a stage asking the room, would any of you white people volunteer to choose to live life as a black person in this country and go through all the things that they go through? And nobody puts their hands up.
Yeah.
She goes, and why would you wish that upon somebody else? And I'll ask our audience, for all for the things that David has personally gone through and endured with his own family, who would choose that? Who would choose to be disconnected from his parents for so long and to be shunned and to be beaten for it? Why would anybody choose that? It's not a choice. And perhaps a conversation for a different time. But just even my own frustration of people in America in general, particularly in our own community, that um, hide behind the Bible or the cross to justify some of these feelings. And like when your dad said, no, God's saying stay here and like play piano, like if that's his defense, like what the hell, right? Like how do you, as a lawyer too, dude, like that is like an infallible argument, right? Like,
Yeah.
but when people use that as their defense and we're trying to use humanity as our leading argument, it's hard to reconcile those two differences, because humanity is my religion as it is yours, equal treatment for all people. Like, how do it's something that I am ashamed to believe, that I grew up in the church as well, and I think about the things that I used to think about people that were not like me, and happy that I evolved away from it, but also ashamed that I even thought that, at the same time recognizing that I was a product of my environment and there was probably not much I could have done to educate myself and be woke, right? 20 years ago, as a child. Um, but I think your story will, if it hasn't already, I know it has, will continue to inspire so many other, not even kids, man, our peers and even some older folks, to just be you.
Yeah.
Yeah, if a gay
Yeah.
Korean dude wins the Congress seat, yeah, some pastors will probably flip the fuck out, right? Like, but so what? Like, are you gonna, you know what I mean? Like, you did, I mean, up until you quit the law firm, or at the studio to do this, like,
Mhm.
you went to Cal, then you went to law school, then you worked at the
I
first, and you worked at the
I
county district
think
attorney. Like, check, right? You did everything you were supposed to do,
yeah.
and then like the realization, the realization that you have to admit that this person was born this way and this is a fundamental part of who he is, then somehow that negates everything. Like, come on, right? Like, it's logic to me, it's logic to you, and it's the very basic form of logic, which is just humanity. But I don't know, man. I, in some ways, and not to discount the trauma and the pain that you probably still go through, I am so glad that you are running this campaign with that behind you,
Oh,
because
for sure. Yeah.
for people to realize, and particularly for Asian Americans who are grown up in the conservative church bucket or in the bubble, this is big, right? For a pastor's kid to come out and then to run for Congress proudly as a gay Korean dude, like that in of itself is pretty awesome. Once you win, it'll be a bigger deal, right? Because you represent the future of not just America, but for kids that look like me and you to just be who they are authentically. And that if the son of a prominent Korean pastor who literally stood up multiple churches here in the States and made his living building churches can do that, then that story deserves to be told forever and ever. And in addition to you being a damn good human being and standing for the values that you do, I am just so looking forward to you being able to share that story from a position of authority, from a position of trust and credibility, because you've earned the positions that you've earned. And so for that, David, I am just filled with so much emotion. Doing what I do, sitting in this chair, talking to as many people as I do, you hear it all.
Yeah.
Still wasn't
And
still wasn't
no,
ready for that.
yeah, no, I just wanted to add, I think there could be some people wondering, so is he a Christian or not? What I what I said was, I don't think I think there's a higher purpose to everything, in the sense of the family that you were born into, the friends and relationships you have, the opportunities that open up for you, and it's all divine. And so for me to throw away what I was brought up with, is there's also something there. And so I've embraced Christianity. I am a Christian. I believe in God. And but I also think, though, that if you were born into a different religion, then do that if that helps get you there. And I know that a lot of pastors and friends of my dad and mom, if they were to hear this, would be like, "Oh my gosh, that's heresy." But for me, it's just like, it's like you're going to a destination and you have methods to get there, and maybe one of the fastest ways to get there is by car. So you have like a Hyundai Sonata or a Ford whatever, or a Tesla, whatever the car is, and they represent like Hinduism, Christianity, whatever. They take you a certain extent, but you have, I think, each of them emphasize this personal relationship with whoever it is. They take you to a certain point, but there's a certain point where the cars can't go past, and you have to journey yourself. And so, whatever car you use, whatever religion, that's fine. And embrace what you were born into and your heritage, because there's probably a purpose to that. So yeah, I am Christian, for those who are wondering. So, but then they're like, how can you be gay? Well, let's have a different time and discussion for that.
But even just the fact that you had to explain that, David, I think speaks to, for people who are not raised in the environment, just the amount of pressure that we grew up under to have to always explain things. It's true, right? Like, I didn't ask you if you were still Christian, and I don't know if anybody thought it, but you felt the need to justify it.
I felt the need to justify for the Korean Christian listeners.
It's okay. They already turned it off already. Let's skip to the next episode. The moment they heard gay porn, they said, fast forward. We're not finishing this episode. So you have been, because obviously your parents are sort of the final hurdle in sort of the general populace of letting people know. For 2+ years, everybody's known. For the past 9 months or so, you've been building back up your relationship with your parents. And so now you're making this run for Congress, which is, wow, it's a big deal. Even just to have run, I guess, placed in the top 2 of the primary and to be on the ballot in November is a big deal. Not only is it a big deal, David, I think the way you're doing it is even a bigger deal. the platforms on which you stand, the people that you count as your influences. Share with me your relationship or your involvement in the world of politics. Having gone to law school and having worked at the county level, we can get a little bit of understanding of your adjacency, or at least familiarity with the world of law and politics. You shared with us a little bit earlier that you were frustrated and you did not see any solutions coming out of, what the current state was. So you wanted to be the one to go in and shake things up. That nobody was running on a platform of universal basic income or other basic humane and human needs. Take us through that thought process until the moment you shouted to the world, "Yo, I'm running for Congress."
Yeah, I believe that thought process, and this is the thought process that we shared during interviews. But I remember the first time when I started doing these interviews related to congressional campaign and promo purposes, and just to get the word out. I initially had said, you know what, I was politically activated when I was campaigning for Kenneth Mejia, when he ran for this spot that I'm running for currently 2 years ago. And that's how I was politically activated. And it's true to the extent of political activism in the sense that we know of as actively making change and taking action and doing it in different ways, whether it be a policy issue campaign or a congressional campaign or a state assembly campaign. And so in terms of that, that was my first exposure. But I didn't realize that my first exposure to and following justice as my leader, and in a way, and I like to think of justice as a person just to personify it more, but the sense and feeling of justice, I wasn't aware that that was leading me throughout my choices in law school. It was leading me throughout my career choices in my legal career as well, where eventually I realized, wow, a lot of my artist, writer, director, singer-songwriter friends are being taken advantage of attorneys in the entertainment industry, who you would think would not take advantage of their clients because they're attorneys. But the way they take advantage is through money. So when you have a struggling artist paying a 10,000 retainer to an attorney, and the struggling artist is just getting meager residual checks, how does that match up? And where is the compassion in that relationship? And why would that attorney even do that if the attorney is aware that their client is in that position? No matter how much money you want to charge, or no matter how much you want to get business. And so for me, it was very heartbreaking to see different artists and writer and director and other friends get charged an arm and a leg for a contract that they could probably be charged less. And so it was funny because one extent, while I was working, and it's hard to get your foot in the door with the entertainment industry. So there were times where I was working as an attorney for free because that's how you do it, and the legal market was shitty. And so I would work as a full-time attorney for free. Then I would go drive for Lyft and Uber at night from 7 p.m. to 3 a.m. doing the hustle. And then I would sleep for 3 hours, go back to work, to my free lawyer job. But during that time, I was also helping my friends do their artist contracts, look over it. And I asked them, why are you asking me all these questions when you have a $10,000 retainer with your attorney and I'm helping you for free and I'm like on 3 hours of sleep? And they say, well, they don't really take the time to explain it as carefully as you do. And like whenever I have follow-up questions, they're always annoyed or they're not available. And then when I do call, then they a 1-minute call is like charged 30 minutes. And so it was just, oh my gosh, you guys are being manipulated and taken advantage of. And that's where I thought, oh, there's a market for this. There's a niche for this. We can revolutionize that. And so I created the HollywoodLawyer.com, October 2014. I couldn't have done it. I'm going to give a shout out to Jason Ma. Jason Ma was one of my main clients who helped me, and it continues to this day to seek me as his main legal counsel, where if it weren't for his monthly also legal services, I don't know if I would have been able to start that out. But I started October 2014 to provide to provide niche legal services to creatives, to make flat fee options, hybrid options, and to make it more affordable and something that they can know ahead of time up front. And so that went off well. I ended up becoming known as the K-pop attorney at some point, because different K-pop acts would contact me and say, "Oh, I found your contact through so and so, or through Cube Entertainment, or whatever, and I hear that you're the attorney to contact in LA when it comes for K-pop acts needing an American English language contract to be looked over." And so I wrote like different articles in Korean and participate in that. And so I made my contributions in the whole Asian American aspect, and that was my contributions as an Asian American, really helping with that. One of my clients, like some clients where Kev Jumba was my client. He's still a good friend. Um, uh, Fiona, who plays Kitty Pong in Crazy Rich Asians. Just different people and K-pop artists, from Amber, Ailey, and other people out there. And be on the lookout for Ailey. She's coming out with great music in the U.S. market soon. I did that shameless plug. but yeah, so I spent my time doing that, and while doing that, I realized this is what drives me to do my work every day, to wake up and realizing that I am making a change in all of these clients' lives, because every time, I don't even ask them to do reviews or whatnot, but they go ahead and do their own reviews. They go ahead and go out the extra leg and say, "Hey, David, is there anything you want me to do for you? You explained that so well to me, and we're very happy with our deal." And I guess I felt like I reached kind of this end point where, all right, my duty's done here. I still have these other items I want to do. And one of those items was to really be organizing in the community, to be involved, to be active in that. And so I chose Kenneth Mejia's campaign in 2018 to be involved with that. And that's where I remember receiving a text message from Kenneth Mejia, who's Filipino, and he's a few years younger. And I remember receiving a text from his campaign, and it was talking about all the right policy issues and values, and it had all the right language. And I was like, what? This kid is younger than me? What? This is awesome. He's stepping into his power. And my whole thing was, you have to be transparent. You can't have two masks I mean, to a certain extent, we do act differently in front of different people because they bring different elements of us. So that's a different thing. But for me, it was all about transparency. And it was around the same time where, or it is the same time where I had my 18-month break with my parents. And I was like, yeah, I'm true to myself. Although it hurts right now that I can't talk with them, and I have this fear that they'll show up on my doorstep, there was this other side of freedom where I was like, yeah, I'm my free man. And I was going around saying, no, you earn money. Like, it doesn't make sense that you're paying all this tax and you're still worried about how to pay rent. And that's where I was really able to find my voice and my power on Kenneth Mejia's campaign. And what I loved about him is he empowered me by letting me be his number 3, 4th person on the campaign team, even though he had already had a campaign team, and he let me take over certain aspects of his campaign. And it was just kind of these different teachers along the way with Kenneth and with various friends and relationships that I had, that I realized, oh my gosh, it shouldn't end here. And so from Kenneth's campaign, although he lost, he only ended up winning a total 28% of the vote. But for him, that's a huge thing, because as a Green Party candidate, there's less than 1% registered as Green. But he managed to get a third of Democrats to not vote for their Democrat candidate, but to vote for the Green Party one. And so when I saw that, I thought, you know what, Kenneth, you need to run again. And he was like, no, I'm not running again. It's like, no, this guy's only been in office like a year. You need to run again. It's like, no, I'm too burnt out. And so I thought, okay, well, we'll leave it at that. And then I was looking for more local organizing efforts to be involved in. And because I was living right now, I still live in MacArthur Park Neighborhood Council District area. I went ahead and ran for office for MacArthur Park Neighborhood Council. I won a position on the neighborhood council. For those who are hearing for this for the first time, neighborhood councils in Los Angeles, we have 99 neighborhood councils. Each neighborhood council serves 40,000 residents of LA, and they're according to certain boroughs and neighborhoods. So Koreatown has about two different neighborhood councils encompassing that area, and various other areas. You have different neighborhood councils representing them. But when I started serving on the neighborhood council, I realized my eyes were opened up to even more worlds and more encounters and more relationships and people that I got to know, not just from Kenneth's campaign, but now even in our own community. And what I realized, oh my gosh, like this financial distress is so deep, where this thing of financial anxiety, like for myself, worrying about this $200,000 student loan all the time was eating me away. I can't even imagine how you're feeling because you don't have money to pay this month's rent and to pay for your car bills or your medical bills right now. And to realize that this daily deep rooted fear and anxiety of money wasn't just personal to me. It was common to every single person in our neighborhood and our community. And it was that bigger realization that hit me, where when you see concrete examples of these 50-year-old, 60-year-old moms and grandmas on our neighborhood council finishing their 2 to 3 jobs, running to the meeting, afraid that they're late because they're going to be marked tardy or absent for a thankless volunteer job, but then they're doing it because that's the last thing that they can cling on to prevent their neighborhoods from being gentrified and to prevent themselves from being displaced and their families being displaced. And seeing that, it was like, wow, there's nobody standing up for you guys right now. Like, we have elected officials that continue to be reelected, but they're not really standing up for you based on what the voting, how they vote, and what issues and bills that they're putting up forth. So, for example, the current incumbent in our district, during a time of COVID-19 where masses of people now don't have jobs, instead of just opting for a rent and mortgage suspension or cancellation, something that could really help the people, he's more supportive of a rent relief fund where you put the onus on tenants to apply for it and to jump through all these hoops and hurdles. And where that's something that a landlord is better situated to do. I mean, and I'm for a good, there's a lot of good landlords, but just overall, like in a time where, in a pandemic crisis where you've obviously seen the one-time stimulus check take weeks and even will take up until September to get to some people, you've seen that. How in the world are you fighting for these less direct relief measures? Or how are you thinking that a recurring monthly direct cash relief to the people right now is a little extreme when you just bailed out billions to companies that are actually some of your corporate donors? For example, Delta, JetBlue, they were bailed out in billions, but yet they laid off or they say that they will lay off their employees. Guess what? They're corporate donors of my opponent. And so it's just these connections and dots that our people have to make of why do we feel that the same old continues happening? It's because, and I think it's not to say that we're arbitrarily enforcing purity tests, but money is a powerful energy, and if your money and your campaign is being sourced by corporate interests, and you have only 400 individual donors and I have 800 individual donors, and I've actually knocked on more doors, but just because you have more corporate funding, you win the election, something is fucked up in our system. And that's what I realized and hit me to the core and had me resign from my job, had me go all in with this campaign. And so, yeah, so that's where I'm at right now. Currently, although I am working on this campaign pretty much full time because I end up working till very late, I still need to pay the bills. So instead of working 12 hours a day at my studio job that I had and for a corporation, I was actually looking for a job, a day job to switch to that would be very more meaningful to me and justice driven. And I was watching the reboot of Party of Five on TV several months ago, and I was watching episodes 1 and 2, and the parents are getting separated from their children, and I started crying while I was watching, and I didn't understand why I was crying, but to me, I think it might have reminded me of me and my own parents, and that's a whole different situation. But just being able to connect to that, it allowed like a gush of waterfall of tears, like what just happened a while ago. And I was like, oh, that's the practice area I need to switch to. So right now I'm a part-time immigration attorney. I defend people from being removed. So when they receive a notice to appear to be deported, I go to court for their appearances and plead for an extended stay. Prior, when President Obama was president, we had what was called prosecutorial discretion, where as long as you had a good, clean criminal history, you were paying your taxes, even though you didn't have papers, we would just sort of close your case and just move on. But Trump is not allowing that at all. And so we have to, at all costs, defend removals. And for those who might be wondering, why is that so important? Yes, I get the whole fact that America is the land of the free, and that's an opportunity that we're shutting out from some people. But I think but it's even more than that to those who are listening. When I'm pleading in court for the judge to extend their stay, I'm talking about their personal accounts of my client who's 16 years old, afraid to return to Honduras because literally there's gang members waiting for his return to kill him as soon as he lands foot. And that's the stuff and gravity that our people really need to realize. Like, if we really are saying that we're the land of the free, and we clearly know that if we send this person back to their country, they're going to be killed, isn't that within your power to have them just stay here then? Doesn't that make sense? And so I think that it's the spiritual revival of DC that's needed as well. I think a lot of them who are legislating right now, they're like balloons with cut off from their strings or grounding, and they're just flying aimlessly in the air without being connected to their communities, without being connected to the palette of human emotions, of humanity, the struggles, the suffering, the grind, all of that, the emotions involved. And I think that's caused by money. That's caused by no term limits. That's caused by a lot of things. And now is the time for reform, and for us to do that with all of our communities. And some people say, wow, David, but you're Korean, you're Asian, you shouldn't be doing that. That's not the typical thing for you to do. But it's like, no, I think that has more to do with it, perhaps. And so when I write birthday cards to my dad, or the Happy Father's Day was recent, and I say to my dad every time, I'm like, Dad, thank you for immigrating to the States. And he loves hearing that. Because for my dad, Korean dad, it's hard for them to express and to communicate their love. So the way I communicate my love is to my dad is to show him and to get him more involved in the daily happenings or things that I'm doing. Because for him, it's like 보람있다, like, yes, I immigrated to the States. My son loves me and he's making it worth it for me. And to him, that's love. So I'm just communicating in his love language with him. And I think it's very important for us to find out what each other's love languages are, not just like on this lovey-dovey type of thing, but on a collective scale, on humanity scale. Like, what does that look like? When we say that we love the people, what does that tangibly look like? Do we still have people out on the streets? Oh, we do. Okay. We need to step up in that and show our love in that area. How about this area, other area, and then so forth. So yeah.
Man,
those are things that have propelled us to be here.
I love you, man. And I'm not the only one. I'm going to rattle off some folks and some organizations that our listeners will definitely consider household names, very familiar names, who have publicly voiced their support for your campaign and you as a fine human being. Marianne Williamson, Andrew Yang, and his organization Humanity First, Our Revolution LA, and most recently the Sunrise Movement. What do those names mean for you when they publicly support you and your vision of how you want not just Los Angeles, but America to look like?
Yeah, for us, our campaign, we recently, because we were operating on a 5-person team in the primary election, and now we're operating on a bigger team, we rebranded our campaign and really aligned it and grounded it to make it community focused. So our slogan now is community first. And so you see that on our slogan and our logo, on our logo. And what I feel, and I gave a preview of this a little before, what's currently happening right now in DC is elected officials are legislating like balloons cut off aimlessly in the air without being grounded to their communities. So instead of having the situation currently where legislative representatives are first taking action, making and passing these bills in DC, and then coming back and reporting after the fact on the crumbs that they've managed to garner for the people, it should actually be the other way around, where representatives are actually having full-blown discussions and town halls and AMAs and office hours with their constituents to see what they really need, and then go back to DC and report back. And that should be the process. And if we have to baby them by saying and putting in a requirement of every elected official must have available office hours that are easy to seek, or whatever mechanism that we place to start re-engaging the people, that's how we can start shifting back to a more centered, humanity-centered, aligned government. Because if our legislators are legislating first and then come back to report the crumbs that they've given us, that's wrong government. That's not a representative government at all. And so for us, our campaign, we also, on our website, put weekly office hours for constituents. So if you're a constituent living in CD-34, you can sign up for Zoom office hours. If the slots run out, we'll add more slots. And our idea is to continue this even after we get elected and go into Congress, to have weekly office hour components for constituents to do. But what's important for these local endorsements, especially Our Revolution LA, Sunrise Movement LA, and we are seeking a few more that will be pending and announced. But the reason why it's important is every representative and elected official should be co-governing with the people, because the representative's duty and job is to manifest and represent the will of the people. And if you're not doing that with engagement, if you're not doing that with discussion, if you're not doing that with attending their protest, listening to their cause, putting your finger on the pulse of what's happening right now, then you failed as a representative. Step down and let somebody else run. And so for me, I've been really involved in my local neighborhood council. I've been involved ever since COVID-19 happened. A thing for me was, oh my gosh, people won't be able to pay rent. So I can't even tell you how many times I've protested in front of Mayor Garcetti's house with different groups of people. I think I've been there 15 times. I don't know. I've been there a lot. Just protesting, picketing sign, doing car honks, protests, and different, whether it be cancel rent, commandeering hotels for unhoused brothers and sisters, doing all of that, and putting my ear to the ground, because I think it's most important to talk with those people that are actually doing the groundwork every day on the ground. So those groups here in Los Angeles, for those who are listening, are Ground Game LA, K-Town for All, Sunrise Movement, Our Revolution, LA Can, No Olympics LA, and various other groups, Black Lives Matter. There's a lot of groups that I couldn't mention, People City Council. So there are these other groups where they really know what's going up, because their one and main focus, Jerry, is when they don't have their bread and butter job, their whole focus is on the policy issues that group is focused on, and that's their life. They're experts at that. So how are you going to legislate in DC according to what the DC experts in DC tell you, when they've never actually lived here and they don't know what the struggles here are in their daily community? So what's going on right now in the government is we have this spectrum of real issues going on for the people right now, but then our officials are over here thinking that this spectrum of issues that they're dealing with accurately represent their communities, but it's not. And so we really need to tether it down by holding our officials more accountable, by increasing community engagement, and really pushing that movement for co-governance with the people again. So that's why these endorsements are very important to us, to show people that, hey, look, like we're working nationally too, if that name power helps you, but then we are also grounded with our local bases here too. So a variety of those endorsements are important.
The things that you share about what you believe to be what government should be are unfortunately some things that some people are like, wow, I don't know anybody who does that. Like having office hours with your constituents, like even using virtual means, because showing up somewhere physically when you say my town hall is XYZ in a district as large as 34 is excluding some people who don't have transportation, who don't have time, who don't have ability. Marching alongside protesters at the mayor's house, saying you have and you continue to mess up and you need to be better. Like the mind boggle of how those basic human things as fellow citizens and fellow community members seem such crazy novel ideas, because we've been conditioned to think that the average politician is a rich, privileged, well-educated, well-connected old white guy who just comes and nods his head. Like that's sort of been purposely and because of our own complicit silence and just letting it happen. Like that's the definition of what an American politician is for very many people. And what you are proposing as the alternative is not radical at all. In fact, just as Marianne's message, just as Andrew's message, and just that is yours, this is like just human shit, man. And you are as authentic as they come, because if things go as they should, you are going to be one of the first still. There are some, obviously, like Andy in New Jersey and others, like Korean American congressman, a gay Korean American congressman, somebody who's been extremely authentic and open about some of the things that you've done in your past with no shame, because history is fact and fact shouldn't be covered. Somebody who's not afraid to talk at the level of his constituents and share his raw emotions and just speak it like it is. Why is that? The fact that that is a novel, crazy, socialist, communist, crazy idea that you're going to get painted as, like, how did we, in a district, mind you, that is, you know the numbers better than I do, like minority majority, right? Like everybody's an immigrant in 34, right? Like you mentioned, you know, little Bangladesh, Koreatown, Chinatown, little Tokyo, historic Filipino town. Dude, like every, you know, and obviously in MacArthur Park area, like it is literally a representation of the world. And the thing that binds the world together is our basic humanity as human beings. And you are proposing things that just really, the common denominator are the things that make us human. And for people who are like, who've listened to this show, like none of this should surprise you. Like this is the way I feel about, you know, politics and the people that we've had on the show. Like this is not rocket science. And so step one, I guess, is for you to run. Step two is for people to learn about you. And step three is getting people to know more about you, while 2xing the individual donor count of your opponent is wildly impressive. And we're still 130 days. I only know because Grace called me yesterday and she says, do you know it's 131 days until election day? And I said, well, now I do. Shit. And how
many was it? How many was it?
130, I think.
Okay, got it.
I think. Grace, if my math is wrong, I'm sorry. Grace, you for LA City Council CD10. But, you know, it's like, it's impressive that you've gotten 800 individual donors, but that is a fraction and almost a rounding error of the people who you stand to represent in the district. And in the grander scheme of, you don't have to live in 34 to donate to your cause and to become a supporter of yours, because as we've seen as recent as this Tuesday, when certain Elliot Engel voted out of New York, other people. Yeah, and we'll see if, you know, the Kentucky count isn't final yet, right, until next Tuesday. So like we're still in this wave of, yes, a blue wave, but a particular brand of blue wave that is, I don't know, you can't like dissect colors even more and divide, but still, right, like the more human beings, the more progressive and the more the good guys are coming and sort of taking the voice away by voting with our dollars and our support and our votes. Some of these Democrat folks who don't actually, and this is factual because their voting records and their donor records say it, like they don't work for us, and they've benefited from purely not being Republican, maybe, or just, you know, right time, right place, or their opponents didn't do that well, whatever the case may be, right? So, and this is not a, you know, I don't know, a telethon for David Kim here on the show, but if people have listened this far, have gotten to know you, have heard your stories of the greatest triumphs and some of your most dark memories, and believe that you will be, you should be, you will, that you deserve to be the congressman to represent council or District 34 of California come January, and we'll decide that here in November. What is a meaningful way for people to step up and support you, whether they are residents of 34 or they live in Michigan? How can people support you? What would be meaningful to you?
Those are great questions. And I usually would just give the whole generic, go donate on our campaign website, davidkim2020.com. Go volunteer, davidkim2020.com/volunteer. And those are two options that you can most likely do. For if you're living in Michigan and you do want to help out, we do have opportunities for you to volunteer or donate, whether it be text banking or phone banking or other things. And if you have other skill sets, whether it be creative, graphic design, we are in need of them all. So let us know on that. But I think in regards to this Asian American community specifically, and I'm not generalizing, but my observation and experience up until now has been, I'm just laying it down there. I've played a pivotal role in Asian American entertainment and the legal landscape. And so it would be, I guess, it would be cool to see that community come out and actually come out and say, hey, like, we should actually unite on this front and endorse David in, I don't know, a collage of endorsement videos or tweets or whatever it is. But I feel like I'm lacking that, even though I'm from that community and helped out. Or I get a lot of Hyungs and Nunas or other Chinese, Taiwanese Hyungs and Nunas like repeat back to me very jaded and not interested. Oh, I don't think you have a real chance because if you look at the numbers, and it's like, just say you can't donate because you can't donate. Like, I would rather hear that than trying to prove to me that you're not donating because you don't believe in the campaign and trying to do that. And so I found more opposition in terms of whether it be calling different people for donor support or for endorsement support or just complete lack of interest. And I think that has to do with this general notion or general awareness that we have in terms of Asian Americans could be better at getting out the vote and being more civically engaged in that aspect. So I get that. So it's just a matter of how do we work with that. And so if you're listening to this podcast and you are a member of Asian American community related organization or group, or you know somebody that does, please feel free to share our information, our campaign with that member. And the reason why I say this is I've done my fair share of a couple of interviews here and there, especially with Asian affiliated ethnic community organizations. And after doing the interview, they're like, that's great, that's etc. But we've decided not to make an endorsement in the race. And without naming the even specific names, like Korean American so and so club or Korean American so and so organization, they flat out say no, we can't endorse you. And it's like, why? Why'd you make that decision? It's like, oh, we like Jimmy, and they can't really tell me the real reason. And the real reason is because if they endorse me, they're afraid that they're going to ruin their relationships with the current incumbent and also disadvantage what the current incumbent could be doing with the Chinatown community or the Korean community or whichever community it is. So in a greater level, it's sad to see because I understand where they're coming from, because they're thinking more larger picture of, oh, if we decide to endorse David, but David loses, it's going to backfire on our entire community. So let's not endorse David, but let's also just tell him a lie and say we're just not choosing to endorse anybody for the reasons stated. Like, it would be better if they could just straight out tell me and say that. So we have clubs like I'm just going to say it, the Korean American Democratic Club. You didn't endorse me. How in the world? How in the world? And I'm not going to hold it against you. After I get elected and win, come to me with support all you want and the help all you need, and I will help because I'm here for everybody. But you let me down, and I don't know. It was just this whole Korean thing. Like, I don't understand. So I'm calling you out, Korean American Democratic Club. But just so if you have, if you're in an organization or no organization that can endorse, it would help a lot. The second thing is we are developing different policy pages. If you look at our website right now, we have some existing pages for different policy issues. We will be developing an Asian policy platform issue page separately and a Spanish-speaking communities platform page separately. So if you want to contribute into your feedback of, David, I heard you're developing an Asian policy specific platform page. These are my ideas, or this is what I would love to see, or these are some concerns I have. Please reach out. Let us know. My email is david@davidkim2020.com, because as a representative, as anybody running for office, they should always be co-governing with the people. So if that's you, please let us know what things you would like to see in that Asian policy platform page.
I love you and how just bold you are. Calling people out for their shit. And look, that's the perpetual thing, right? They don't want to support you because you don't have a chance, but your chance would be better if they supported you. And other communities get 100% behind their guy without worrying about the consequences, because in some ways you're never going to forget their support, right? Like, it's mind-boggling. And look, if you're outside of the LA area and you belong to a Asian American, Korean American, whatever, it doesn't even have to be Asian, and any sort of group that believes in the things that David believes in, give him a shout. He doesn't even need to leave home. Like, he'll Zoom in and talk to you guys. And look, because I think, as with the case of Marianne and as with the case of Andrew, the message is sound. It's the amplification of the message and the number of people who then hear it. That's the problem, right? Like, I often think about, had the pandemic hit during the primaries when Andrew was still in the race and UBI became a thing, how things could have turned out differently for him. Because we're talking about it now because it's an actual sound idea. It's just that the timing was off and that not enough people got to hear about it, right? And I think even for you, it is a numbers game. I mean, look, one concrete thing that you can do is, if you've made it to, I don't know, whatever minute this show is into, thank you for investing all this time into David and my talking. Like, share this out. How many candidates for United States Congress gets this emotional and this honest with you? That in and of itself should be, in my opinion, a strong cause why you should support somebody. Because the stuff that you share, dude, like, it's not easy. And even though it's just me and you, the people listening right now are who knows? People listen to this from all over the world, so it's crazy. And so, I thank you for being bold and brave to give up the dream of the 6-figure legal career at X Studio, and then shit, you can always go back, right? But for now, you've taken the path of servanthood to serve the hundreds of thousands of people that are your district. I used to live there. I don't anymore, sadly. Of District 34, and to play a critical role in changing the narrative of the future of America. As cool as it is, I said at some point during a conversation that when the person running is somebody that looks like me, I get excited. But then we have plenty of people that look like me and you, in different parts of Southern California, namely North Orange County, who look like me and you, but don't believe in anything like you and I do. And so we don't play identity politics. It's nice to think that people share similar shared struggles, would believe in some of the shared solutions, but we don't. And for you, I will share very honestly that as I've gotten to know you and have followed you and have engaged with your staff, particularly Hannah Wan, my fake cousin from another family tree, it's the real deal. And I know this is something that many people say, and you're not supposed to somebody who's running for as high as an office as you. Um, whether or not you win in November or not certainly does not dictate the impact that you have had, that you continue to have, and that you will have in the community of all of 34, particularly for people that look like a little bit me and you, for every single gay Korean kid who's deathly afraid to share their story with their parents, and for even parents of gay children who just don't even know how to process information because they've been told one thing for so long. Um, you're going to go on to do great things, man. So, first things first, we got, just over 4 months to help you win. If you're listening, David brushed over it earlier, but go check out davidkim2020.com. Go on Instagram to @davidkim for Congress, and do what you can. People are feeling a little bit helpless because we're stuck at home. Traditional campaigning, literal campaigning door to door on foot is gone out the window. But the upside, as David alluded to earlier, is you can text from home, you can call from home, you can call businesses and to see if they'd be willing to put a sign on the window or do something. If any of my other podcast friends are listening, have David on your show. Not every Asian American show has the same audience, and you and I could ask the same damn questions, and David will give you a different answer every single time. So, look, we're all fighting for the same things. We want to be treated for the people that for who we are, far beyond what we look like. But for us to have a chance at that, we need people who look like us and to feel our pain and to feel our struggle, to be in the positions and in the rooms to make decisions that represent us. And so if you're frustrated as I am that our government is not of us, one small step that I think we can all make is to support David and very many other candidates like him across the country, who believe that America, the way it was supposed to be, is something that is still feasible and that we will do everything we can. So yeah, David, thank you again so much. I wasn't ready to hear some of the stories that you shared. And I'm glad you did. It is 2020's been a weird year. I hope we ended up on a high note.
Yeah, I wanted to just say, you had mentioned this point of, I know there's people at home hopeless, not knowing what to do, and that's the key thing to not do is to not lose hope, because our hope is the source of our power. And if that hope isn't there, where does our power come from? We can't just create it if there's no hope. So don't lose your hope, because then you're losing your power. So be encouraged. I hope this inspires your connection with you in some way. If it doesn't, go listen to a different episode.
If they listened this far, they're in.
Okay.
Hey, David, I want to thank you for your time again, and want to ask for your help in helping us finish out the episode in classic The Asian American style. As many of our listeners know by now, this show is a letter to the Asian American community from the Asian American community. And more importantly than those two things, it is for the Asian American community. I set out to start this show as a gift to my daughter and even for myself to give permission for people who look like me and you to share the stories that are so common to us, yet we have not, we continue not to be as encouraged as we should and can, to really share how we feel, to share our own common experiences. We get some pretty meaningful and awesome letters back from the community. And I think it's because it is in the spirit of the show that we share our most intimate thoughts and our deepest convictions. And so, David, if you can help me finish out the show, I'll start. And if you could finish out the letter. Dear Asian Americans,
we are very beautiful. We're gifted. we're talented, we're unique, we're similar, we're different in so many ways. And it's encouraging to note and see that we acknowledge the similar struggles that we've been through, the similar moments of happiness and joy and experiences of also sadness and difficulties that we've all gone through, and we're able to relate to that. But take heart that those moments and all of those experiences allowed us to have conversation, to come together, to talk more, to discuss more, to connect on things that make us cry, to make us laugh, to make us passionate, to make us angry, because that's what makes us human. And it's okay to have different emotions and feelings, whether that be at a time in your life where you're embarrassed of your heritage, or you wish your community could be doing more, and it's okay to have those feelings at some point in our life, because we're human, and there's no need to beat ourselves over the head or to judge ourselves or to give ourselves a hard time, given that we have that Asian upbringing to do so. Just let that go. But I think right now it's more a time for us to just let go, give ourselves permission to be ourselves, to admire the flaws or weaknesses in each other, in ourselves, and to embrace that fully, because it's not only until we embrace completely fully ourselves, our communities, our family, our parents, our own identity, that we start to embrace our own self as a person. And that's definitely what my own experiences have showed me. And so what I would like to close off with is, don't forget to be your full, beautiful self, to be you, because that's where you're able to have all of yourself in one place in the present moment, and to be your powerful self. And no one can take away your power unless you let them, even your fears.
Thank you. I'm just so grateful that you decided to come on the show to share with us your life, your story, your vision, your passion. For a guy that has perhaps one of the most common Korean names in America, because I think our parents just flipped through the Bible and said that one.
King David,
yeah.
Kevin.
I was named after the mouse, so I can't really give a biblical
Oh.
connection to my name because I couldn't sit still, apparently. Always, running around in places. For a guy who has a very, very common name, you are as uncommon as they come. And I mean that in the best and the most loving of ways, my friend. I'm excited to see your campaign gain momentum. I am excited to see you grow and to have people in our community, particularly within the Asian American community of District 34, to start getting to know you a little bit better, to start understanding who you are. People can judge a lot by a picture. People can judge a lot by a campaign poster. And this is the first time that you and I have actually shared conversation. And I can confidently say that just in a relatively short 2 hours of getting to know you, I don't care what the issue is. I don't care what the actual thing is. I have a pretty good feeling you're going to always do what's right for the people. And so in that way, I think you're doing your parents proud, man. In full circle of all the sacrifices that they've made and all the challenges that you've had with them. They raised a good son. So thank you for your stories. I know it's hard. Keep fighting the good fight, and come back anytime. When things change, if you want to share an update with us, might be fun actually to get you and Grace on a show together to talk about some of the issues that really matter to our community, because there's some overlap there between her district that she's fighting for and yours. But yeah, really appreciate you coming on, sharing your story. Be well, be safe, keep fighting the good fight, and ultimately, thank you for being you.
Thank you.